Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. With reference to Council of Ministers, which of the following statements are incorrect? The Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Parliament. The nature of advice tendered by ministers to the President can be inquired by the courts. President can remove a minister only on the recommendation of the Prime Minister of India. Which of the statements are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference in the PIB article. Let us try and discuss what are these options all about. When we look into the first option, the Council of Ministers is collectively responsible not to the Parliament but instead it is to the Lok Sabha. So the first option is wrong. When we look into the second statement, the nature of advice tendered by ministers to the President can be inquired by the courts. This is once again wrong statement. Why? Because the courts would not be able to inquire what was the advice given by the minister to the President. We have one of the important articles in the Constitution of India. We have Article 74 of 2, which clearly gives this exception where the advice given by the minister to the President cannot be inquired by the court of law. We have one of the landmark judgments given by the Supreme Court of India in SR Bommai versus the Union of India, which clearly shows the exception and the limits of the Article 74 clause 2. What does the SR Bommai case say? The SR Bommai case, that of the Supreme Court of India, clearly says that the advice given by the minister to the President will not be inquired by the court of law. What suggestions was given by the minister to the President will not be inquired by the court of law. But an order is passed which will have implications to the future. If there is a law that is passed, the material may have to be given to the court of law. What advice, what suggestions will be given will not be asked, which ultimately means that the court is only concerned about the validity of order, not what happened between the inner council of ministers and the President. So the article here clearly protects and preserves the secrecy of the deliberations between the President and the Council of Ministers, but at the same time it also gives importance to the judicial review, which is part of the Article 13. Now the third statement says President can remove a minister only on the recommendations of the Prime Minister of India. This is a correct statement. Why? Who appoints the Prime Minister? It is the President. Who appoints the Council of Ministers? It is the President. On the call of the Prime Minister, a Council of Ministers will be appointed. If the Prime Minister decides that a particular person has to be removed from the part of the Council of Ministers, the same suggestion will also have to be taken by the President, where removal proceedings can be initiated by the President. So the President can remove a minister only on the recommendation of the Prime Minister of India is the right statement. Now let's look into the second question. Which of the following are correctly matched? Gunboat diplomacy, use of limited naval force as threat to advance foreign policy. Shuttle diplomacy, diplomatic negotiations conducted by an official intermediary who travels frequently between the nations involved. Track 1 diplomacy, formal methods of conflict resolution involving diplomats, ministers, head of states and representatives of international organizations. Which of them are correctly matched? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference to this particular conversation where during the times of India-Pakistan war in 1971, what happened was a call of gunboat diplomacy. Let us try and understand what is this gunboat diplomacy, what is this shuttle diplomacy and different tracks of diplomacy. First up, what is this gunboat diplomacy? This is where there is a particular country which uses the concept of hard power in an indirect manner. What is diplomacy? Basically, it is about interactions between the country. There are two forms of powers. One is the hard power, the other is the soft power. Hard power is use of military, soft power is use of cultural advantages. When it comes to hard power, use of military where a particular country showcases its naval force, intimidates another country so that the country way that it intimidates follows the rules and regulations of the country which is threatening it. So basically, whenever the conventional form of diplomacy, where interactions between the countries fail, where talks between the countries fail, larger nations usually put up or showcase some of their larger ships or the warfare ships suddenly across the coast of smaller uncooperative countries. Basically, during the times of 1971, we have the Indian coast. What happened? We had the Bangladesh as well, which was back then called as East Pakistan. So United States of America to a limited extent was supporting Pakistan during those times, but India had the support of Soviet Union during the period of 1971 war. Because India did not listen to United States of America, that is why United States of America sends some of its naval ships into the Bay of Bengal. So the use of naval ships or the military force, the naval force, is what is called as gunboat diplomacy. Next, what we have is shuttle diplomacy. What is this shuttle diplomacy? Let's say we have two countries. Let's take the example of Israel and let's take the example of Arab countries. They are not in good books. Both of them do not like each other. They also do not like each other for the fact that Israel had occupied Palestine. So during this particular period, you require a neutral party which is close to one country, that is Israel, which is also close to the Arab forces, that is Saudi Arabia and all its coalition partners. So what happens? United States of America and its representatives move from one country to another. So what do? They move to Israel, speak up, they go to Arab countries, they also speak to the Arab countries. So you have representatives of United States of America go both to the Arab partners as well as to Israel, conduct a type of diplomacy, that is what is called a shuttle diplomacy. So basically, a third party or a party who is wanting to settle this particular issue will speak to both opposing parties and ultimately discuss a particular policy framework or an international policy, is what is called a shuttle diplomacy. So a shuttle diplomacy is where diplomatic negotiations is conducted by an official intermediary who will belong to a third country or a third party who travels frequently between the nations involved. So the nations involved here is Israel, and it can be Saudi Arabia or any other country where the parties are in dispute. So a third party steps in, they interact with each other and ultimately bridge the gap. That is what is called as shuttle diplomacy. Next, what we have is track 1 diplomacy. What is this track 1 diplomacy? Let me give you an example. Let's say if we have the diplomats from one country or the ministers of that particular country or the government in itself which holds the political power, it speaks to another country, interacts with another country, settles down the dispute. That is what is called as track 1 diplomacy. So the official governing body of that particular country interacts with another governing body or the government of the another country, and they ultimately settle the differences, is what is called as track 1 diplomacy. Next, what we have is called as track 2 diplomacy. What is this track 2 diplomacy? Apart from the government, let's say we have the business leaders or let's say NGOs. It is not the government which is interacting in the other country, but NGOs from one country speak to NGOs to another country. Business people from one country speak to business people in another country. They interact, reduce the friction, improvise on the relationship. That is what is called as track 2 diplomacy. In track 1 diplomacy, it is official where the government conducts it, but when it comes to track 2 diplomacy, it is the business or the NGO or in fact people from other setups who come together, bridge the gap that is existing between the countries. Now, as part of the assignment, you guys have to put on the comment section what is track 1.5 diplomacy. We have discussed what is track 1 diplomacy. We have also discussed what is track 2 diplomacy. You have to put on the comment section what is track 1.5 diplomacy. Now let's look into the next practice question. Pegasus, recently seen in news, is a theft tactic that allows hackers to create a fake credit card by stealing the information of an individual's actual card, malware that can initiate total surveillance on the targeted device, virus capable of slowing down internet traffic, ransomware attack which has hit hundreds of US companies. Which of the statements correct describe about Pegasus? Pegasus happens to be a malware that can initiate total surveillance on the targeted device. What is this Pegasus? Basically, it is a spyware tool. This is designed by one of the Israeli firm called as the NSO group. So what is it? It is nothing but a spyware where the minute it is installed on that particular person's mobile phone, what would happen? They would start tracking the person's microphone, they will start accessing the person's camera and the applications used by that particular person. Primarily, the objective of this particular spyware is to use it as a surveillance tool. This particular tool, which basically makes use of loopholes in the software, was used on WhatsApp, which was used for spying on the government officials, journalists, activists, lawyers, and in fact multiple other people including India as well. So basically this is one of the malwares that was initiated for total surveillance on the targeted device. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference in this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. This region is surrounded by Gulf of Aqaba. Strait of Tiran connects two water bodies. Its coastlines touch Mediterranean Sea and Red Sea. The country in question, is it Jordan, Egypt, Syria, or Israel? The answer to this is Egypt. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference to Egypt in this article. So kindly remember, we have the Gulf of Aqaba, we also have the Strait of Tiran as well, and when it comes to Egypt, it touches Mediterranean Sea as well as the Red Sea. That is why the answer to this would be Egypt. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following has have occurred in India after its liberalization of economic policies in 1991? Share of agriculture in GDP increased enormously. Share of India's exports in world trade increased. FDI inflows increased. India's foreign exchange reserves increased enormously. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. The answer to this is 2, 3 and 4 only. Why? That is because after 1991, share of agriculture in GDP did not increase. In fact, it had decreased considerably. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2017. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is Central Information Commission. What are we discussing about? We will be discussing about the major amendment that was introduced in the year 2019. When it comes to the Central Information Commission, it was constituted under the Right to Information Act of 2005. According to the Right to Information Act, it was established, and this is what is called a Central Information Commission. The Central Information Commission is headed by the Chief Information Commissioner. So kindly remember, and this will have not more than 10 information commissioners. So it is headed by the Chief Information Commissioners, and the maximum number of information commissioners that this particular commission will have is not more than 10. There is appointment of the information commissioners that happens by the President of India on the recommendation of a committee. This committee basically includes the Prime Minister of India. This includes the leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, and this also includes the Union Cabinet Minister who is appointed by the Prime Minister. So there will be 3 people. It is these 3 people who will select who will be the information commissioners serving the Central Information Commission. What is the objective of this particular discussion? The objective is we have the original Act of 2005. We also have the 2019 amendment as well. If you look into Lakshmikant, which is the preferred book for most of the civil service aspirants, it says that the tenure or the period of the information commissioner is about 5 years. This has been changed by the 2019 amendment. When it comes to the Chief Information Commissioner, they would have a tenure of 5 years, that is according to the original act. But what is the change that has come in? The change is that the tenure of all information commissioners at the central and the state will be notified by the center. So it will be notified by the center, but originally it was about 5 years prescribed by the act. When it comes to the quantum of the salary, the Chief Information Commissioner was getting a salary equivalent to that of the Chief Election Commissioner, and that of the other Central Information Commissioners were getting a salary equivalent to that of Election Commissioner. Then we have the State Information Commissioners whose salary was equivalent to that of the Chief Secretary. This was what the quantum of salary in the original act, but this has been changed in the 2019 amendment, where the salaries and allowances of all these officers will be determined by the central government. Then when it comes to deductions in the salary, originally in the 2005 Act it said if such officials are receiving pension or other retirement benefits, their salaries will be deducted by an amount equivalent to the pension. This was the provision present in the original Act, but this has been done away with when it comes to the 2019 amendment. So if there is a preliminary question which speaks about the quantum of salary and the tenure of the Chief Information Commissioner or the Information Commissioner, kindly remember it has been updated by the 2019 amendment. It is this that we have to understand in reference to Central Information Commission. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.